So, Anneliese Hanson, it is such a
Mhm.
pleasure to be joined by you on this first installment of JT the LA Storyteller Podcast for 2025. How are you doing after such an incredible and historic week in Los Angeles County? Are you safe? Are you well? What has your day this Monday looked like so far? Please enlighten me.
Thank you for asking. As my Opa always used to say, may you never live in interesting times. He always said, may you live a boring life. That was always his hope for us. I don't know if that ended up happening, but uh I'm in East Hollywood, so I'm actually in your neighborhood. I'm we're good here. We are not in the direct path of the fire. We did get that false evacuation warning though, twice on Friday, and that was very scary, including the one that came out at 4 a.m.
Wow.
I definitely jumped out of bed. I mean, to my point, like I actually was sleeping in my clothes, like I was sleeping in my jeans and my sweatshirt and my socks on because I was ready to go, man.
Right. Right.
4 a.m., get this emergency notification, and I'm like, okay, here we go, got to get the cats. And then what was it, like 15 minutes later, there's that notification that was like, LOL, just kidding.
Mhm. Fail. LA County,
I
what a mess.
know. I was so bad. Um, but yeah, otherwise pretty good. On Wednesday and Thursday though, the air quality was very, very, very bad. I mean, the air like literally tasted like poison. Um, so I think that you got out of town for that, but I was still here, and it oh man, like I was talking to a lot of people actually, like our like eyes started hurting, throats burning, got a really bad headache, got really tired, like not good, not good. Um, but otherwise, holding up all right. Today has been very, very busy for me. I'm not even done working. I'm going to keep working after this. My practice, I run a group practice in Mid City, Mid Wilshire, and we have gotten just like a deluge of requests for people for therapy services. And I am a full time therapist, and I also do the full time admin for this group practice. So I am a little beside myself when it comes to being like very busy.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like you are wearing multiple hats at once. We'll get into, yeah, just what that entails in short time. But first, please tell me a little bit about your platform as My Goth Therapist. Tell us a little bit about how you got to this and what you use your platform to talk to people about.
Yeah. So I am at my underscore goth underscore therapist on the soon to potentially be short-lived TikTok, rip. And then I am also on Instagram, same handle at my underscore goth underscore therapist. It was going to be your goth therapist, but somebody already took that.
Hmm.
But if you can't find me on TikTok for reasons, then definitely look on Instagram. I just mirror all my posts over on Instagram. I'm not very active on that page. If you message me or comment on my stuff on Instagram, like I don't even hashtag anything. So if I'm not super responsive, please do not be offended. I have multiple online platforms that I have to manage, and it's kind of a lot. But I started on TikTok about a year ago. I think actually, yeah, a little over a year ago, because I have a very specific set of skills and expertise that most mental health workers and therapists and even doctors, healthcare providers in general, are not aware of. And I had just kept getting, request after request after request from people like, you need to start a podcast, or you need to start YouTubing, or you need to do a TikTok. I decided to do TikTok because that's where the eyeballs are, and I can just do it really quickly on my phone. I don't really have a lot of time to like, do a full video setup and video editing. YouTube, I think eventually would be the ideal, but what is it that I do? What do I do? What is my niche? Because it's very niche, right?
It is very niche, of course. And I mean, on that note, we can totally start a YouTube at some point. I definitely have some ideas that I'd like to run by you for sure. So definitely be on the lookout for a lot more from My Goth Therapist, and consider this a a primer and a little bit of an introduction to the issues that you are deeply concerned with, because you've actually spent quite a bit of time in this industry, right? So let's establish to be certain that My Goth Therapist is a platform by you, and you are a licensed mental health care provider. You also have your own private practice, as you noted, but your experience with this industry dates now quite a bit of time. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about what led you to become a therapist in the first place. I mean, what was that like in the beginning, and tell me about the sort of arduous, that deeply arduous path before we could ever have this conversation about the industry now.
Yeah. So as the name implies, I am a therapist. I'm an LPCC, so licensed professional clinical counselor, or LCPC, depending on your state. I am licensed in 5 different states: California, Minnesota, Illinois, Delaware, and Iowa. Might be adding Arizona to that. We'll see if I get around to it. But I am a licensed counselor. I have been licensed since 2015. So coming up on, actually, no, it's 10 years. It's 10 years as of January 1st. So way to go, me. It's a big accomplishment. And I think we were just talking a little bit before we started about how you do have a firsthand understanding of, like, when you say arduous, like the arduous journey of becoming a licensed therapist, like it's a lot. And
Oh,
it is not user friendly. And the other area of expertise that I have is in insurance. I am a self proclaimed insurance expert. And after talking with a number of insurance providers, executives, people that I used to work with in the insurance industry, other healthcare providers, and even, healthcare litigation attorneys, I can very confidently say that I know a heck of a lot about health insurance and healthcare law and healthcare policy, and how all of that interweaves into the way that we are able to access and consume healthcare services here in this country.
yeah. Now, in Los Angeles, as we were also saying prior to starting this discussion, we have, of course, been dealing with this historic fire, these historic fires, I should actually say, that
Mm-hmm.
have led to so much loss and devastation. And what I'm really curious about, actually, is how that has impacted your office, even through just the last couple of days, because you were mentioning, for example, getting a whole ton of requests from folks reaching out, right? Please tell me for a moment a little bit about how that's impacted you most recently, and then we will get right back to that journey, because I definitely want to honor both, if you will.
Yes. Well, I do have to say, if any of you have tried to contact me in the last few weeks, I am very sorry if I haven't gotten back to you right away. My wait list is now at over 35 people, and I got 27 requests for therapy services in 1 week. 1 week, 27, 27. Okay. My maximum caseload is 25 people a week, by the way. That's going to be, either 5 people a day, 5 days a week, or between 6 and 7 people a day, 4 days a week. I tend to not work on Friday afternoons, or at least I try not to. So it is tough. It is tough to manage. There are not enough hours in the day for me to accommodate the amount of people that want and need services. And I always feel really bad about that. But I'm also just one person who really tries their best. And our offices are safe. We are in mid city, which means that we are, relatively unaffected by everything so far. Um, I don't think, the fires have been mostly, kind of relegated to the hills, not relegated, but I mean, they're in the hills and sort of the valleys and the canyons and stuff.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that you should ask about the intersection of, these historic wildfires that we're having in Los Angeles and insurance. Again, because insurance is like my jam, the first thing that I looked up was homeowners policies. I looked up the history of homeowners insurance and fire insurance for LA County and LA City proper, because one thing that insurance is really, really good at is they are good at running the numbers. They are good at probability and statistics. I actually have a secondary degree of MBA with a focus in statistics and healthcare analytics. And insurance companies are probably the best people in the world at coming up with probabilities, right? They are very good at predicting likely outcomes based on the math. They hire the best actuaries in the world. And I was reading that State Farm, and I actually read this last year, so before the fires happened, that State Farm had canceled, I think, about 70% or more of the homeowners policies in particularly like in the Malibu, Topanga Canyon, Pacific Palisades area, because and this is back in 2024, and they specifically said that it is too high of a wildfire risk. I don't know if they canceled them or if they refuse to renew them for the next year. But that was State Farm. They said that it was too high, at like an unacceptably high wildfire risk for them to want to underwrite the policies anymore. So that is going to be, I believe, people trying to get reimbursement from their homeowners insurance. That is going to be a struggle, a decades long struggle. I am foreseeing that to last years after these fires are over.
I'm so glad that you could lend attention to that. And actually, when you say too much of a high risk, I think another way of framing it with respect to what you were noting just earlier is too high of a probability that something can and will go wrong, right? So when we think about probability, it's about the likelihood of one outcome or another. And so in State Farm's analysis, there was too high of a probability that a huge wildfire would take place. Therefore, they got out before their money was lost, before their investment uh, was nothing but a deficit, if you will. So I think it's so key to highlight that. And I also want to point out that anyone listening to this podcast installment this evening who has lost their home, who has lost their business, who has a long way to go to navigate just what is ahead, I want to share a moment of silence for you. And I want to let you know that you are not alone and that this conversation is for you and for every worker and every working class family out there who is set to take on these corporations in the name of insurance companies out there. So, shout out to you all. Thank you, Anneliese, for sharing that with me. And with this in mind, I want to ask you a little bit about, well, once again, the journey that it was just for you to reach this point, just for you to get to Los Angeles with your own private practice in mid-city, right? One thing that you mentioned as well was that you've gotten a lot of requests over the last couple of days. And it seems to me then that there's kind of too many people for just one therapist. And so I wonder then why there aren't more therapists, especially at a moment when it seems like there are quite a bit of info info tidbits out there suggesting that people go and find a therapist or sign up for therapy. I think your journey in terms of how you've described it to me, can say quite a bit about why you all tend to be so overloaded even now.
Mm-hmm. And let me say, because I hear this is one of my pet peeves, listening to podcasts and especially podcasters who I respect. I do not in any way, shape, or form recommend that anyone sign up for services from a particularly very litigious company. It starts with B and rhymes with Schmetter Schmelp. They are essentially the Gold's Gym of therapy. They will take your money. and you may get a therapist out of the deal, you might not. I have heard from so many of my viewers the absolutely appalling quality of some of the therapists that they've encountered. And then they make it very easy to sign up for this service, which is not covered by insurance, by the way. They are not paneled with any insurance companies, because actually insurance companies find them to be too risky. And I will explain what I mean. When I say risk, air quotes, that's also kind of like an industry term. It's a what we would call a term of art. So I'm going to define that really quickly as well. But no insurance carrier will contract with a Schmetter Schmelp because they find that they do not properly vet the therapists. They allow therapists to work from overseas, which is uh, not legal. Actually, you
Mm.
have to be physically located in the state in which you are licensed, because if there ever ends up being any problems or ethics complaints, you need to be beholden and answerable to your state board. That is for patient safety. So, for example, I cannot be in Denmark and giving therapy to clients in California. What if I do something unethical? What if I do something illegal? Denmark's not going to do anything to me because I'm not bound by any of their laws. You would have to talk to the state of California BBS, the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and they wouldn't be able to help you at all because I am out of the country. So that is a big thing. Not a good idea to work with a therapist who's located in a different state, or if they are not licensed in that state or a different country. Um, that is just for consumer protection.
Mm.
That said, when I say risk, risk is really a term of art, like I said. So, risk exposure, risk management. In insurance land, risk means being exposed to having to pay a claim. They see any claim that they actually have to pay out as risk. So, for example, when you say why is it so hard, like, and I should also add, I would say 95, 96% of all of the therapy requests that I have gotten the past couple weeks have all been from Anthem Blue Cross of California customers. Basically every single one of them, Anthem Blue Cross of California. Why is this? What is going on? Well, Anthem Blue Cross of California operates what is known as a closed network. They do not allow providers, especially mental health providers, to apply to be in their network. They say, we're full, we're good, we've got more than enough therapists, thank you very much. And Kaiser actually operates on the same model. Why are the rates for Kaiser so cheap? Because Kaiser operates what is called a closed network, just like Anthem does.
Mm.
And what it is they limit their, I'm using air quotes, risk exposure by having fewer therapists than can meet demand. So the fewer patients that can actually get in to see a therapist and get therapy services, the fewer claims are going to be submitted for mental health services, which means the less money that places like Kaiser and Anthem have to pay out. This is their business strategy. So they can say, oh, we're following the Mental Health and Parity Act. We offer mental health benefits, but if they intentionally keep their network artificially small, it means that you're basically it's basically impossible to find a therapist who actually takes your benefits, which means that the therapists that do exist are not going to be billing very many claims, which means that the insurance carrier doesn't have to pay out for those visits. Does that make sense?
Actually, it makes a whole ton of sense, Annalise, and I'm gonna throw in like a round of applause at it just after that because you have exactly broken down what I have heard in passing about a few of these insurance agencies or insurance companies, including that for Kaiser, it's been incredibly difficult to find a therapist over the last couple of weeks, and that I believe they take on cases this is what I've heard. I don't know. You may or may not have some light to shed on this. They take on cases only in the most extreme circumstances. Therefore, if you're not like dealing with a life-threatening issue right at that time, they figure you can wait a bit. And so there you have denying, uh, delay, and defending, right? Which we'll also get into before too long. But is this also something that registers for you? The fact that this company is essentially allowing only for the most severe cases to sift onto its providers and then letting everyone else who is not as severely in need hang until perhaps that request just fades away. Is this your experience with that at all? Or are you hearing this from your colleagues,
Absolutely.
maybe?
Yeah, yeah. So I have a number of friends, colleagues, mutuals on social media. A very good friend of mine, William Johnson, LMFT. Whoop, whoop. He is the union shop steward for the National Union of Healthcare Workers for SoCal Kaiser. And they're coming up on month 3 of striking right now. I don't know if you've seen this. The Kaiser therapists right now are on strike because of this exact problem. Kaiser has intentionally understaffed their clinics to such an egregious degree, and there's such a high demand for services. I believe that the number I was quoted that for every therapist that they have, there are 150 patients that need mental health services. And the yeah, I know, I saw your face. Um,
That's mathematically impossible to service.
yes.
And then I think about what you have said regarding these companies keeping their numbers artificially low, as in because they have designed this kind of
Mhm.
format for their therapists and their clients alike. I mean, it's a lose-lose for worker and for client.
Mhm. The working conditions for the Kaiser therapists are absolutely unacceptable, and they are striking for very good reason. Kaiser, by the way, has been taking out full page ads in the LA Times, and I think, what is it, the San Diego
Tribune.
Tribune? I can't remember. Chronicle? What is it?
Which one was the other name you mentioned?
The San Diego, the big San Diego paper.
Yeah.
Um, but they've been taking out these big expensive full page ads where they're saying, therapists are playing games, they're wanting too much money, they're so greedy, they're playing games with patients' mental health, blah 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 blah. No, it's Kaiser could fix this problem tomorrow, like that. They could fix it tomorrow if they decided to adequately hire and staff up their therapy team. They don't want to. That is the problem. They don't want to. Every therapist that I've talked to, some people have caseloads as high as 55 patients a week for hour-long sessions. Hour-long sessions. Okay. So you're talking 55 direct face-to-face contact hours a week, which are probably some of the most acute cases because you can't get in to see therapy services at Kaiser unless you are pretty high level of acuity. When I say acuity, I mean like, suicidal ideation or
Right.
psychosis or, active drug use.
Right.
And so you have these intense situations. And then these people are on salary, by the way, so they're not getting paid overtime, and that's already 15 hours a week over. They don't get paid for extra time for doing their case notes. So think about this, your therapist has to write your case note. If they're doing a good job, they have to write up a treatment plan. They're not getting paid for calling out to parents to let them know on progress for their kids. They're not getting paid to call to the school to do IEPs, individualized education plans, or to help out with school accommodations. They're not getting paid to call CPS. They're not getting paid for the time spent on hold with CPS if they need to make a CPS report. They are not getting breaks. They're not getting bathroom breaks. They're not getting lunch breaks. People are reporting that they're getting like UTIs from having to basically not use the bathroom for so long. And it is just like back to back to back to back. Oh, and need I mention, they took away their pensions.
Hmm.
Oh,
Incredible.
yeah, they took away the therapist pensions.
So what you're saying then is that if I became a therapist tomorrow and I
Mhm.
decided that I want to serve my community right here in Los Angeles and that Kaiser Permanente is kind of strategically positioned for me to take that on, what you're saying is that going to work for Kaiser is going to work for a corporation that is absolutely intent on providing the least amount of service to any client possible and the least amount of resources to their workers. What you're saying is that actually neither the service providers who are on their third month of striking nor the clients are winning whatsoever in the current format. And therefore, when we see something like Luigi Mangione and the United Healthcare debacle, we see a whole lot of outrage around industries that are not actually in the business of providing services for clients, but that are in the business of profiteering from those needs.
Correct. And another really fun tidbit that I love to share is that when I say Kaiser is artificially keeping their network small, so for example, I'm an LPCC, and that is a newer license type in the state of California. Different license types in different states will have kind of dominance. For example, Montana, Texas, and Illinois, those are LPC, LPCC states. And then Minnesota, California, those are LMFT states, so licensed marriage and family therapist. It just depends on when the license got established in which state, but these are all co-equal licenses, okay? I also have my degree in marriage and family therapy, and I can do all the same things that an LMFT can do or a social worker can do for the most part. And Kaiser, I actually applied to see if I could be in network with Kaiser, I think a couple years ago. And they sent me an email that literally said LPCCs need not apply because they did not think that we were a viable or a valid license type.
Ah, and what
Do you know how many
you
thousands of LPCCs there are in California?
And what you drew from that then is that Kaiser was intent on not increasing its range of service providers. So that they found a reason then to say no, even though there are thousands of people with your qualifications who could do the work, who are actually, I suppose, like legally licensed to do that
Totally
kind of
equal
work.
license.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Like my license number is in the 9,000s. So, it just goes in like one, two, three, four, five, six, so mine's in the 9,000s and I got that. Oh gosh, I want to say like 4 years ago. So it's well over 10, 11,000, LPCCs in California now. And to just like have a blanket policy where they are not going to hire or contract with an entire license type to me is wild. And that's just completely arbitrary.
Now, before we move on, we should also note that actually Kaiser Permanente has been taken to court for some of these improprieties that we have referred to so far, and that they have lost in court, meaning they've been found guilty of such gaming the stats, so to speak, including in Northern California. So in NorCal,
Mm-hmm.
which also saw workers, that is, mental health providers, going on strike, they took Kaiser Permanente to task. Kaiser Permanente eventually ceded and, at least on paper, promised to do better. But here we are in SoCal, where basically the same demands are being made, and yet Kaiser is apparently not willing to play ball. Instead, they'd rather take out ads at the LA Times, at which I haven't seen these strikes covered, I should say, now that you mention it,
Mm-hmm.
and the San
Mm-hmm.
Diego Tribune, which I don't read because you already know.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting how those dots connect there, actually. But uh, yeah,
And
I
if I can actually share
wanted
a
to
personal
shout this
story,
out.
this is actually a
Yeah.
very personal story. This is where mental health care access. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where things get very serious. So, one of my cousins, I have family down in San Diego, and one of my cousins who I was close to, she had bipolar disorder, and bipolar disorder unfortunately runs in my family. It's very genetic, and if you have bipolar one, that's the type where you have depression and mania, and when you have a manic episode that is unmedicated or uncontrolled, it can become very, very dangerous.
Hmm.
And she had Kaiser. And this was during the pandemic, where, so the thing with bipolar disorder is you can maintain your stability pretty well if you have, ready access, kind of regular access to your medications. Like once you kind of reach that like sweet spot with like your medication regimen and you got that exact right like recipe that works for you. And by the way, when it comes to disorders like bipolar disorder, I am very pro medication. Take your meds. Take your meds. If you need meds, take your meds. And because they will keep you alive. And it is a difference between life and death a lot of times. And she had a psychiatrist that she was seeing through telehealth through Kaiser during the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, her psychiatrist was like, okay, I'm going to go out on maternity leave in 2 weeks, peace. Because she was pregnant and she couldn't see that the psychiatrist was pregnant because it was all over telehealth because you only, see this person's face, right? And so the psychiatrist was like, all right, well, I'm just going to rely on Kaiser to give you referrals to another psychiatrist. And surprise, surprise, Kaiser did not have any available psychiatrists to follow up with my cousin and, continue her medications. And so my cousin, was without medications for a period of about 3 months because, for some of these, pretty heavy duty medications, think like your Seroquel and lamotrigine. These typically have to be prescribed month by month because you have to be like under direct supervision, or especially with lithium, you need to have blood draws every month, depending. And so she was without her medications for about 3 months. She unfortunately went into a manic episode. Um, became extremely she was a danger to herself and others. She was behaving in ways that were very, very unsafe, and she was hospitalized, and Kaiser limited her stay in the hospital to 5 days because again they want to mitigate that risk, right? They're like, oh well, she's probably fine, we're just going to put her on a bunch of Seroquel. And she got released too soon, did not get stabilized, was okay for a couple weeks. The manic episode came back because she had not been properly stabilized, went back in the hospital, was in only for 3 or 4 days, then went out. My family, they actually paid out of pocket for a couple of her hospital stays until they just couldn't do it anymore because it's expensive. It's like, $1,800 to $2,000 a day sometimes for cash rate for inpatient hospitalization. And she was never able to consistently get back in with service providers through Kaiser. And she ultimately ended up taking her own life. So
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to know that this is taking place, that this is one of so many stories out there, that this is why people are so outraged at these corporations and why we cannot cede ground at this point and settle for incremental changes, but why we need to call for systemic overhauls of these industries, which we just so happen to be in what appears to be a completely ripe time for. That is because of everything taking place, right? So whether it's wildfires in California, or whether it's United Healthcare CEOs, or whether it's a matter of these corporations that get to run amok with money
mhm.
from working class pockets somewhere. The point is that people have had enough, and people.
I was gonna say she worked for California Public Schools too. So
This is also something that I've heard
in
about.
Oakland, in Oakland. Yeah.
Yeah, this is also something that I've heard quite a bit about recently as well. The sort of burnout that workers experience at these jobs that they should be covered for. That is, that they should be protected against. That they should not have to advocate, especially not individually, for some kind of overhaul on. I mean, I also can't just help but think about that image of these nursing home patients in Pasadena who were rushed out of the convalescent homes in a daze because the wildfire threatened to overwhelm them. I mean, for me, there is nothing that says America today, right now, than elders who are on life support in some cases being rushed out in the middle of a firestorm. I mean, that for me tells you so much about how we need to not just reform, but abolish the current model and truly begin anew from the top down, which is something that your platform is completely dedicated to, as is mine.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you had asked me, there's a few questions and they're all intersecting. So
Yeah.
I'll try to make it, as quick as I can in the interest of time. So yes, I am, like I said, a therapist. I do have my own caseload. Prior to starting my private practice, though, I worked for Cigna Healthcare. Cigna, the big healthcare giant out of Connecticut, and I worked for Cigna because I needed a. They actually hire licensed therapists, licensed nurses and therapists and social workers for some of their roles. And when I was getting my licensure hours, you ask, like, why aren't there enough therapists? Well, one, it doesn't pay enough money typically. I mean, it's getting better now, but we have to fight tooth and nail for wage increases. Anything, any kind of wage increase, they don't want to give it to mental health workers because we are not respected as a profession by, the corporations and powers that be. And I worked in community mental health trying to get all of my, my internship hours and my associateship hours. So, one, to be a licensed therapist, you have to graduate college, right? So you have to get your BA, and then you have to go to graduate school and get your master's. It's either 3 years or 4 years, depending on your program. So that's another 4 years. My grad school is over $100,000. And then and you have to do up to 2,000. I had to do 3,000 unpaid internship hours during grad school in order to graduate with my degree. So unpaid. So I'm talking like 20, 25 hours a week of unpaid internship hours, plus a full graduate school course load. Plus I was working at bars and restaurants at night to make rent money so that I could, like eat. So I'm working, like sometimes up to like, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. You realize that you haven't like had time to even take a shower for like 3 or 4 days, that kind of lifestyle. And then after graduation, you're not licensed right away. You have to do another 2,000 hours, depending on the state. And in Minnesota, where I went to school, it was 2,000 hours minimum of face-to-face therapy directly with clients. And so that's about 40 hours a week of face-to-face therapy hours. And you are absolutely beholden to whatever agency you are doing those hours through, because they're the ones that sign off on those hours. They're the ones that supervise you, and they're like, okay, yes, these hours can count towards your licensure. And there's a lot of places that really abuse that and they hold that over people's heads. The agency that I worked for, they underpaid. They actually illegally had all of us listed as 1099 contractors instead of employees so that they didn't have to pay our employee income tax. In California, that is actually illegal. And actually, if
Is
you
it
were
not
listed as a
illegal in
1099,
Minnesota?
it wasn't at that point. I did report them to the IRS, and the IRS audited them and found me to be, they found the case in my favor. But yeah, it's not illegal in Minnesota. And I think I made $22,000 a year at that job. And I had to pay over $8,000 in self-employment tax, air quotes, self-employment tax. Basically, all of my coworkers, all of us had master's degrees. We were all trying to, get our therapy hours. We were all either on food stamps or food stamps eligible, people like not being able to like, their cars break down and they'd have to ask, for money for their kids, not able to buy gas, not able to buy groceries. And, not only that, but now I don't know if you know about the Public Service Student Loan Forgiveness Program, PLSF, that's currently being held up in the courts. But it had been that if you had 10 years of public service for a
Oh,
state
right.
agency, yeah, the place that I worked was a county and state funded, mental health agency. You could get your student loans forgiven if you
Yeah,
worked 10 years in one of those programs. Well, guess what? 1099 contractors are exempt from PLSF loan forgiveness.
of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course they are.
But like, yeah, so after the 2,000 hours, right, then you have to sit for your exams and your boards and your licensures and pay all this money and da, 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 da. So it's difficult and almost undoable unless you have like either an external source of funding or you're like me and you just are okay with eating oatmeal every day of the week. Go ahead.
Well, actually, when you mentioned this, just to help paint this picture a little more for folks out there, This is all before you are a fully licensed practitioner. And because you
Mhm.
said you took care of these service hours in the state of Minnesota, I'm wondering if when you were seeing these clients, I'm wondering whether they were coming to you at an office. You mentioned working for Cigna, for example. Was there like a headquarters that you had where, though things were slightly sporadic, you at least had a team that you could lean on? You had resources at your disposal. I mean, what did that time look like as you were required to service so many different clients in one day, let alone a week?
Well, first off, this was mostly in-home services because these were clients who were severe and persistent mentally ill, or it was also a substance abuse treatment program. So these are people who are all going to be on Medicaid, Medicare, and most of them do not have cars, do not have transportation. So it's very unlikely that they would be able to come to the offices, which means that we did in-home services and we were not paid for gas and we had to use our own cars. We had to pay for our own internet, our own hotspots, which back in the day was really expensive, and we were not reimbursed for any of that. And we had to drive around to people's houses, apartments, sometimes in really not great areas. A lot of people had their cars broken into, a lot of people, were attacked by dogs or had their laptops stolen. One of my coworkers was actually attacked by several dogs. When she went into a house, she had her wrist like lacerated and permanently injured, and of course, the company didn't pay anything for that. And for me, it's middle Minnesota, so it's the middle of winter, and it can get 30, 40 degrees below zero. And a lot of my clients, they no show or they sleep through the appointment, and they have to let me into their apartment or they have to let me into the building. A lot of these places are secure buildings. I can't just go in there. And so, the car heater's running, but there's only so much it can do. So I ended up getting actually nerve damage on a couple of my toes because it's so cold that I can't, like, I'm just sitting in the car. Like, I'm serious. I'm serious. Um, and then if I didn't see the client, I didn't get paid. I only got paid for hours that I spent face to. I know your face. You're just like,
Oh man, Annalise, we are definitely laughing rather than crying right now for
Mhm.
those of y'all's reference. And I have to ask you because you have described this incredibly taxing journey through Minnesota. I can't help but ask you if actually, aside from everything, there is a Minnesotan accent that that you that you may be concealing or hiding or shying away from, because I don't know. I'm curious about what other places sound like, including in terms of how people engage with each other there. So basically, I'm now asking you for the accent.
Sure, okay. So usually the Minnesotan accent doesn't really come out unless I've been drinking a little bit or if I kind of like slip up. So I remember one time I was going back home to Chicago, and there's a big difference between the that Chicago accent and then Minnesota, but they both have very flat vowels. It's very nasal. And I asked my dad, I was like, "Hey, can you go pick up my coat?" And he's like, "You're what now?" And I'm like, "My coat." And he's like, "Say that again." I'm like, "Coat." He's like, God damn it, mocking me. Yeah, so usually like this kind of accent, like the only actress that I've ever or actor that I've ever seen that can actually successfully do a Minnesotan accent is Frances McDormand from Fargo. She did it to the nines. She did a great job. But nobody else, not even like the chick that played like Stuart's mom, like that's not a Minnesotan accent. Like, get out of here. Are you kidding me? Just so bad. Like, people can't do it. I don't know what the deal is. But anyway, you're gonna find this more in like rural Minnesota and then like northern Wisconsin, maybe some weird parts of Michigan. Um, and some of the Dakotas too. But like typically, if you're in the city, you will try very hard not to talk like this because it kind of makes you sound like a hick. Um, Sorry for anybody that I'm offending. But yeah, so just the Minnesota, it's very sing songy. Um, And it's also great. Like if I want to really terrify people and I want them to just like, jump out of their skin, I'm like, oh, how are you? How's it going? You doing good? Good? Everything's fine, right?
You know,
Smooth?
I realize too, Annalise, that even after everything we've talked about so far, if there's a singular reason why after this you'll likely have a whole lot more requests for services or a request to land on your clientele list, it won't be because of your radical stance on so many different things that are relevant to workers and working class families. It'll be because of the Minnesotan accent that you.
Minnesota. Say it out of your nose. Minnesota. Imagine your entire sinus is talking.
But
Okay.
okay, I mean, there was also.
Oh, the reason I started working at Cigna, right? Um, so the reason I started working at Cigna is because they hire licensed clinical counselors or licensed counselors to work on their. Oh, do you smell that? Something smells like burnt plastic.
I think, let me check the Watch Duty app.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna look out the window really quick.
Check it out,
Take a look.
Annalise. Yeah.
Oh. Oh man, it's coming from outside.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on Watch Duty so far, but yikes.
It just smells like poison.
Oh,
To those who are not in California, by the way, and you want to know what is going, it literally smells like poison outside. I cannot. I actually had a client, actually a couple people that I know that were in Manhattan during 9/11,
yeah.
and they were like, yeah, it smells like 9/11
Yeah.
outside. That is
Yeah.
what it smells like right now.
I mean, and it is 9/11, not in terms of the amount of casualties, but certainly in terms of scale, certainly in terms of the economic impacts that will be felt for decades on end, all the lives that have been changed, and so on. Absolutely. Now, with that said, I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk a little bit about your rise up the ranks, so to speak, at Cigna, because that would actually turn into a whole experience with the way that these insurance companies do business with other major corporations, and then how that translates into minimal services for the vast majority of people in need out there. Tell me a little bit about your rise up the ranks at Cigna and what your role was in particular.
Yeah, I had a few different roles. And so when people ask you, like, oh, how could you go work for the devil? How could you go work for Cigna? I needed access to indoor plumbing.
Hmm.
Okay. Like, I needed access to indoor plumbing and heat. And I didn't want to have to worry about catching bed bugs because a lot of
Wow.
our clients' houses also had bed bugs. And it was a really high risk. Like we would, actually like put our computer bags inside of a plastic bag and like tie it up if we put it into our car. And so a lot of people's houses did get bed bugs, and then of course you have to pay for bed bug mitigation, which is really expensive, and people can't afford that because we were only making like 20K a year. It's just this whole thing. So I didn't want to get bed bugs. I also did not want to be potentially stalked or murdered. Um, I had more on this in a second.
Pretty sure.
And then, real story. And I wanted to be able to use the bathroom because we didn't have any access to bathrooms when we were constantly out and about going to clients' houses. So I couldn't really drink water because, there's no place to use the bathroom. If you are pregnant or you have your period or anything like that, like good luck.
Um,
Um, yeah. So I was like, hey, indoor plumbing, cool. Um,
Please get me indoors.
get
Please,
me inside because I am literally going to freeze to death. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
like to stop practicing from my car, which is
Yes,
related.
yes. It would be so cold. It's so cold sometimes in Minnesota that your iPhone like won't turn on.
Oh my goodness.
Like the
Wow.
battery gets so cold that it won't turn on.
Can't even. Picture that. Right, of course.
Yeah,
So
the LCD screen like freezes. But anyway,
I'm sure there was a
so
raise involved, maybe, or I mean, I could like financially, what was that like going from
it was
service
I so Cigna
clients to
hires
being
licensed
inside?
counselors, et cetera, for they have a suicide crisis line. So they actually have a 24/7 suicide and overdose substance use crisis line that Cigna customers can call into free of charge, usually because it's much faster to get a hold of the Cigna crisis line than the actual like state or county crisis line. Shout out any Cigna customers, anybody that has Cigna, I want you to know that. Like 1-800-244-6224. So 1-800 Cigna 24 on your dial pad. That will actually get you to a live crisis line with live people on that crisis line if you have Cigna benefits. It's a really amazing service. So yeah, I was literally on the suicide line for Cigna. And that came with a salary and it came with benefits and it came with indoor plumbing. It was also incredibly, incredibly stressful because these were, literal life and death calls a lot of times. And sometimes just very, very enraged customers that could not be dealt with by our regular advocacy staff
Mhm.
because they're like, oh, you're a counselor, like you handle this call. So we'd get a lot of that too. But everything from critical incident responses, we carried the benefits for Macy's for a long time. I don't know if Cigna still does, but like I remember we would get calls whenever there's that string of mass shootings inside of Macy's, and like one time that we got a call, actually no, a couple times we got calls from employees that were calling Cigna saying, "Hey, can you get a crisis response team here? Like they're literally shooting in the store right now. We're hiding in a storeroom." Serious. I'm serious. So it's interesting, right? So like insurance companies do a lot. They have some really their fingers in some very interesting pies. And so I can't say it's all bad. I mean, that like was legitimately a good service. Um, but yeah, it's very stressful. The hours are really hard since it's 24/7. I worked, I don't know if it's second shift or third shift, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. Yeah, but eventually I changed jobs within Cigna to do care management, which is I manage people's cases when they were in either residential treatment, rehab, detox, or the hospital. I was the person that was determining, like, okay, should you stay or should you go? Now, I'm not allowed to actually like write up a denial. That has to go to a medical director. So somebody like either an MD or a DO that has usually they have to be psychiatrists. And for the most part, I didn't really feel too ethically torn about any of the cases that I sent to denial. There were definitely some where I'm like, okay, this icks me out. But there were several. Unexpected ally in being anti-troubled teen industry is the insurance industry, because when I talk about risk and risk management, the troubled teen industry, so like warehousing, disturbed children or whatever whose parents don't feel like parenting.
Of course.
But it's just, you know what I mean, like the kids that are sent off to residential care or residential treatment or wilderness camps or unlicensed wilderness academies, a lot of times, like
Like
99%
Paris
of the
Hilton,
time it's
actually. Teens like Paris Hilton,
like
I
Paris
believe.
Hilton. Exactly. Yep. We Cigna canceled their contract with one of the places that she went because the quality of care was so abysmal. So there are places like, for example, and I'm going to drop names because this is publicly available information. Diamond Ranch Academy. I believe they're in Utah. Diamond Ranch Academy. They would call all the time, and anytime that I saw their name, I would type up that denial, because if you look, the Salt Lake, I think it's the Salt Lake Tribune, it's done a number of exposés on them. There has been a very large number of child deaths at that particular facility. Very poor supervision, children being abused, assaulted, kids not being properly supervised, children, their medications were not being properly managed. So, like a lot of um,
Use.
untimely deaths at that ranch academy. Same with same with Sierra Tucson. Actually, Sierra Tucson down in Arizona has, I think it was like 6 or 8 patients have died there so far under suspicious circumstances. And then Timberline Knolls, in Illinois, they got their contract suspended or canceled, I think, by Cigna because of an ongoing sexual abuse scandal. regarding their counselors abusing the patients.
Now, of course,
So,
I think that it's so critical for you to do exactly that, to get Easter eggs for our listeners to dig into further out there on their own time so that they can see for themselves what the data has said, what reputable institutions have said about these LLCs or these insurance agencies that are in tandem with them, more or less. To be certain, though,
oh yeah,
you
oh
went
yeah,
from this
yeah. I didn't even think of that. Yeah,
you went from this role once again, believe, up the ranks of Cigna to
I
becoming
went. Yeah, I got a
more
promotion
of a
after that.
regional director of sorts. Tell us a little bit about that aspect of your time with the industry.
Hmm. Yeah. So I was the network market manager for the Western US. I had gotten a promotion, and the network market manager, there were four of us that covered the US, and I helped maintain the behavioral health network. So that meant that I was in charge of sourcing behavioral health providers for our network to meet our customer services needs and to, do solicited recruitments to recruit providers for our network, to kind of troubleshoot any issues. If there's a big name account like Disney ESPN and they say, hey, none of our people can get in to see therapists, what's going on? And then I would, start like a whole, recruitment push to try and like get therapists to join the network. A big part of my job though was sales. I would say that I mostly interfaced with the sales team because a big part of insurance benefits, I don't know if people know this, but when large accounts, so I'm talking like your UPS, your FedEx, your Disney, the National Association of Longshoremen, big accounts, when they are shopping around for insurance benefits, they want to know, what is your network? How many providers do you have of any specific specialty? How many oncologists do you have? How many pediatric oncologists do you have? How many therapists do you have? How many social workers do you have? How many psychiatrists do you have? Because in this era of mental health awareness, the biggest drivers actually of getting insurance companies to like step up to the plate are these big name companies that are demanding more from their insurance benefits, right? And so imagine that we're trying to vie for the business of a big company. It starts with G and rhymes with Schmoogle. And Schmoogle asks us, okay, how many therapists do you have in San Francisco, in the Silicon Valley area? I'm going to have to pull that report and I'm going to have to tell them, oh, we have, 750 or like 900 therapists that are all contracted with Cigna, ready to go to see your people. Um, is that true?
Uh,
Maybe. Yeah.
cliffhanger, cliffhanger. To be sure, just as well before we continue, that was basically what took you from the Midwest to the Southwest, so to speak, right? That promotion, if you will, basically is what got you to Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was told that I had to move to the West. Any Western city would do. And I lived in Chicago at the time. My whole family's from Chicago, actually. And I told them that I refused to live any place smaller than Chicago.
Mm,
So that left Los Angeles. And I ended up in Glendale. That's where the Cigna building is, 400 North Brand Boulevard.
mm,
And I got, transferred out to that office and kind of settled myself in sort of the Los Feliz area because I wanted a good bus line to get to that, to get to Brand Boulevard.
Oh, you weren't
And
driving at the time.
oh, I am public transit all the way. Come on, like I all day long. I have my Metro Transit like print leggings. I have
Which is
I have a
free
tote
right now,
bag.
by the way, which is free all across LA County, given the ongoing nature of these unpredictable wildfires. So shout out LA Metro and Fairless Metro in LA County. But yes, of course, you were there, and what you're describing is basically being a salesperson for this company, essentially finding contracts for you all between the company and like Google or Snapchat or Facebook out there, right? Like your
Mhm.
goal was to sign these companies onto Cigna health insurance so that you could provide your network of mental health professionals. But the cliffhanger we left off on was whether or not
Mhm.
the the brochure you had at that moment outlining just how many therapists you actually had in shop and how many services you had in shop. What we left off on was if this was actually the case or not. Was the brochure entirely accurate in the services it was outlining for potential clients? What you're saying is not so much and not all the
Mhm.
time, and maybe even hell no.
I would say absolutely not. I would say that our network numbers and any insurance company's network numbers, if you try to go through your insurance company's directory and you just call out to every single person that's in that directory, you're going to be lucky to find like maybe 10 or 15 people in that entire listing that actually, one, accept your benefits, two, are actively taking new clients, three, are still alive, or haven't retired. Oh yeah, fun fact. So, again, insurance companies, they run the numbers, right? They have the best access to the best data of anybody in the country for anything, really. As of 2018, I want to say, and this is just for Cigna, but I think you can extrapolate this for all insurance companies. I want to say over 50%, more than 50% of our entire network was 55 and older. So as of like 2018, 2019, over 50% of our entire network was retirement age or older. And then COVID happened. And a lot of our network retired early, or they burned out, or they died. And nobody went into school to be a therapist during 2010, 2011, 2013 because that was the financial crisis. And most people went to school for STEM or engineering or finance. Well, not finance anymore, but like, tech stuff that was going to pay money. So there's like no pipeline of therapy students to take these jobs. So for every one therapist we have in this country right now, there's probably 50 clients or patients that need to get in to see services, and there's just not enough. And we know this. When we were at Cigna, I knew this. So the directories are entirely inaccurate unless there is a legal mandate or a state law on the books saying that the insurance company has to go through and spot check or hand check these directory listings. They're not going to do it. And California is one of the few states where you do have to. But even then, it's really, really inaccurate because what they'll do, all of these big insurance companies here, they just send you an email. Like I get emails in my inbox from Optum, which is the services branch of United Healthcare. Optum and United, by the way, are the same company. I want people to realize that Optum and United are the exact same thing. And you'll get this like little nasty gram from Optum saying, providers, please update your information online or your directory information will be inaccurate. And then it's like, okay, so nobody's calling me. There's no place that I can like call, email. There's nowhere where I can like, fax them or like send them my information. No, no. And then
Inboxes, watch out.
huh?
Inboxes, watch out. You're gonna get an email asking you to verify your numbers. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and and then you try to get on their website, and of course their website's broken. I mean, Optum's website, where you're supposed to update your information, uses this really outdated Jira form, and it was broken for like 3 months straight. So even if I did go to the trouble, like, and I'm in back to back to back sessions, like as a therapist, right? So one, I ain't got time for that. Two, you're not paying me to do that. Three, pay somebody else to do it. Four, fix your dang form. Like you are a multi-billion-dollar company and you can't fix your Jira form. Like anyway, so nobody voluntarily updates their insurance information because there's no incentive to. And if they're like, oh well, if you don't update your insurance information, we could remove you from our network. Don't threaten me with a good time. Optum pays me less than $100 an hour. Why would I? Why? um Funny tidbit, and I don't know if you want to add this in now or later. Did you know that we got us Optum sent all of us emails after the shooting of Brian Thompson, And they said, we were wondering if you can, volunteer your, like, offer your services to do EAP, crisis counseling sessions for Optum and United employees. And I knew for a fact that
Wow.
their EAP, the employee assistance program rate, is like trash, like bottom of the barrel, like $75 a session. Do you want to know how much Medicare pays? Like the Medicare standard rate for 1 hour of therapy, it's $155, 155. And Optum United wants to pay $75 a session. And I emailed them and I was like, okay, are you paying the EAP rate or are you asking us to volunteer? And they're
Wow.
like, yeah, we're not going to pay you. Yeah, they wanted us to work for free for them after their own CEO got shot for a number of reasons. And they're asking behavioral health providers to essentially volunteer services.
They want to
Um,
make you interns again.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I had enough of that.
Therapists,
Thank you very
interns
much.
again. Oh my. Now,
Yes.
I have to ask you this to clarify for us because
Mm-hmm.
we have pointed out some real discrepancies here, some real areas of concern, some really
Mm-hmm.
troubling possibilities here. Are we in fact saying that when an insurance agency is brochuring or looking to solicit new
Advertising.
clientele, yeah, are we saying that they are stat padding? And if we are, if this is what we're saying, isn't that fraud, basically? Aren't they essentially supposed to be held accountable for false advertising, as you were alluding to earlier?
Funny, you should mention that. Yes, they are stat padding. Um, the state of New York Attorney General, Letitia James, has filed a lawsuit against Anthem Blue Cross of New York for exactly this. What you're describing is a ghost network. So when we say that I still work for Cigna, right, and we are advertising a network of like 700 therapists in your city, well, let's say the city of Long Beach, like we have 700 therapists that are contracted with Cigna that can see your employees, city of Long Beach, and you actually go through and you secret shopped every single therapist on that list and you only found like 100 that were actually accepting benefits and actually seeing new clients,
Yeah.
that's called a ghost network because that other 600 people on that list either basically don't exist or they're not seeing patients or they haven't been in network for a long time and none of these companies want to pay the money to actually hire people to go through and check these directory listings for accuracy. That's called a ghost network. And Letitia James decided that this is false advertising. It is a bait and switch. You are essentially selling a service or selling a product that does not exist. And there is another class action lawsuit that just got filed in the state of New York as well against Anthem Blue Cross of New York, again, by Pollock and Cohen LLP. I believe you can look them up, Pollock and Cohen LLP. And they secret shopped child psychiatrists for Manhattan and they secret shopped Anthem's directory. They looked up 300 child psychiatrists, sorry, in Manhattan. And do you want to know how many child psychiatrists there actually were in Manhattan that accepted Anthem and had openings?
Of course, I want to know. Please tell me now.
Three. Three.
Why am I not surprised by that?
I mean, I was actually surprised. I had guessed 10. I was like, probably 10. Like just knowing what I know, I'm like, there's probably like actually 10 people. Three. I was like, wow, that's
Yeah,
even worse than I thought.
in New York City, at that, the most
Mm-hmm.
populous city in the nation, actually, your chances of finding more than 1% should be pretty high. But in fact, that's not what's happened. So Anthem Blue Cross is being sued, and I would hope that this is cross applicable for any insurance agency that is padding the stats out there and falsely advertising services. Now, we started off in our discussion talking a little bit again about the outrage surrounding these practices by the big dogs, by the investment boards, by the corporations which refuse to properly service its workers, much less its clientele. And so, with this in mind, I think at first I didn't understand all the sort of support for Luigi Mangione that we saw online. At first, I wanted to sort of really break it down and see what the various bits and pieces were going into this. Now, I feel like I can see so much more, and I think that we are certainly in a moment here in American history where the healthcare industry, especially, is really being taken to task for good reason, right? So if someone from outside of the United States is maybe just seeing or witnessing a little bit of what the online support has looked like and is baffled over how someone who is alleged to be the murderer of another person gets so much support, actually, what we have to say here is, well, people have got lived experiences in the United States that really lead them down to seriously justified outrage over how these companies treat us, right? So it comes down to the way that people are treated, actually. And I think this is what's going on. But what have you seen, or what might you observe about this groundswell of support for Luigi Mangione and his case, one might say, against United Healthcare?
Mm-hmm. Luigi. We are going to talk about Luigi because this is part of what Luigi, his manifesto, alleged, alleged, right? Because we still don't know if he did it. And he talked about or alluded to the financialization of healthcare. Healthcare is being seen as an investment vehicle and a big money maker in an economy, a kind of, the capitalist society that we have is really on its last legs in the United States. We've gone away from a production-based economy to a services-based economy, and now it's an extractive-based economy where all these companies are trying to extract value out of all of the remaining, sources of production that we have. And so the financialization of healthcare and health insurance in particular has been very devastating and detrimental. Let me explain very quickly about how health insurance actually works. Let's talk about how health insurance actually makes their money. Health insurance is essentially gambling with, your money. When you pay a premium every month, say you pay $300 a month for your premium, that money is used as cash float by the insurance company to use for their own venture capital purposes. Every single major insurance company in the US, United Health owns Optum Ventures, Cigna owns Cigna Ventures, Blue Shield Association owns the Blue Ventures Fund. I forget what Anthem calls theirs, but every single one of these separate air quotes companies are actually venture capital arms of these parent insurance companies. And what they do is they take your premium payments and they use that as cash float for venture capital that they own. They own these venture capital firms. And then they get to make money off of all of their venture capital investment activities. And their entire purpose is to make sure that they don't have to pay any of your cash float back. They want to pay back as little of your cash money kind of float as possible in the form of claims, actually paying for services, paying for care.
Honoring the
One
agreement.
might. Hmm?
Or honoring the
What do you say?
agreement. They want to honor the agreement as little as possible.
Correct. Yes, because we sign contracts. We have a contract with these healthcare companies or these insurance companies to provide services. That is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to administer benefits. They're not supposed to take our money and gamble with it. You could almost say that it sounds like an unregistered bank.
Oh my gosh. Just
Mm.
when you thought it couldn't get any more twisted.
So that is how insurance companies actually make money. That is their actual business. And I can tell you that from the inside. Okay. Now, Luigi, I don't know if he particularly knew that element of it, maybe. But the financialization of healthcare, as you can see, it leads to what we would call perverse incentives, where if the incentive is to kind of that dog meme of no take, only throw, if the incentive is no take, only throw, then they're going to take and take and take and take as much as they possibly can. And they're going to pay out as few benefits as possible, which leads to people dying, which leads to people having poorer healthcare outcomes, which leads to people dying of cancer because insurance wouldn't pay for an MRI 6 months ago when they could have, the cancer could have been treatable 6 months ago. So many stories about this. And United Healthcare is absolutely 100% verifiably the worst. They are the worst health insurance company in this country. And they are headquartered in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. In fact, most of these health insurance companies are in Minnesota in one way or another. I don't know why. I don't know why. But we all worked across the street from one another. I worked across the street or down the street from Optum and United's headquarters when I was in Cigna. It was all in Eden Prairie. And
Awkward.
so, I mean, it's not a good place to work. United is bad. It is bad, bad, bad working conditions. Like if they treat their employees that bad, you can imagine how they treat their patients, customers.
Yeah, and another quick note, actually, especially when you describe perverse incentives, and when you note this as a symptom of their right, apparently, to go off on a venture capital investment with our money. What I can't help but hear echoes of is actually the 2008 financial crisis in the United States, where Wall Street was essentially banking on the probability that homeowners would be unable to pay their mortgages, and where that became somehow profitable, where it became incentivized, leading, of course, to the greatest economic depression in the United States since almost
The
100
Great
years
Depression.
prior. Yeah, since the Great Depression. So it's interesting that you point this out because it reminds me so much of how we sort of got started on this route for you as a professional and for America in this historic moment we found ourselves living in.
Yeah, well, I mean, we say perverse incentives. Financially speaking, the best thing you can do for your insurance company is to die because then you're not an expense. Now, I'm sure they want your premium payments, but either die or change carriers. Um, that's honestly financially the best thing for them. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and of course, at some point, I don't know Luigi Mangioni's path. I don't know exactly what is alleged in terms of where he researched, and I don't know what his family may have been dealing with. But of course, when we saw that people were in fact behind uh, this sort of dishing out of their own medicine against United Healthcare, I learned that, as you said, when a company incentivizes the death or the deterioration of one
Mm.
of our family members, someone we care deeply about, people don't forget that. And in fact, they're going to let you hear about it. And I think that's a huge sort of that's a huge moment for all of us to take in if we intend to study just why it is that people have rallied around Luigi so much over these last couple of months across the country, not just in Los Angeles.
Well, Luigi has not been convicted of anything yet, but I can tell you who was convicted. CONV 310 convicted, disposition date 4/20 of 2017. Could give you the case number two for Brian Thompson. That's also publicly available information if you do a background report on him.
Now, what was he
Um,
convicted of, Annalise?
DWI.
Oh man.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, he didn't hit anybody.
Now, for those for those who come across this discussion because of the mention of Luigi, And for those who want to know your thoughts as a mental health professional out there, as a mental health service provider, I imagine that you can't state something such as whether or not you support Luigi Mangione or not, but I'm curious as to how those who want to continue taking these industries to task and how those who find Luigi's case to be a rallying cry. I'm curious as to what you think they can do to engage with this some more on their end. What are some potential paths people can take, especially as advised, perhaps, by a mental health professional right here in Los Angeles, right here in our neighborhood, we might say.
Yeah. And I am passionate about education. I'm passionate about healthcare education. I'm passionate about teaching people how the insurance system works and how to exercise what few rights you have as a consumer, because this system is not set up to work in our favor. But, the little power we can take, we should. I have not met a single fellow healthcare provider or peer that disagrees with what Luigi did. I'm saying every doctor that I'm friends with, every psychiatrist, every therapist, every social worker, everybody that attends my house of worship, all of us kind of look at each other and we're like, Luigi. Mm-hmm. We're like, yep, I get it. I get exactly why he did it. We all understand this crushing pressure of not being able to serve our patients properly, of not being paid adequately for our services, of not of just having to jump through hoops upon hoops upon hoops to try and get reimbursed for services that we are owed payment for by these insurance companies. We have contracts. These insurance companies have a contractual obligation to pay us promptly and fairly, and they are not. United Healthcare, they were responsible for the Change Healthcare data breach. We don't have time to go into that, but that, mark my words, is going to be one of the biggest disasters, IT disasters ever. They had a monopoly on all electronic claims in this country. So they own Change Healthcare, CHC, and Change Healthcare is responsible for between 70 and 80% of all electronic claims, any claims. So, dental claims, chiropractic, therapy, whatever, that were submitted. They got hacked because United Healthcare is so cheap. Oh, and might I add, Brian Thompson, even though he was the CEO, didn't really want to invest in the personal security budget for himself or any of the other executives. So he just didn't have personal security while he was, I'm just saying. Your face.
The logic behind why should people be mad? I'm just making money.
Right.
Perverse,
Um,
perverse,
so
perverse.
it's one of the worst data breaches ever. And they are so cheap that they just didn't feel like enabling two-factor authentication on their mainframe data server. They just didn't do it. That's United Healthcare. That's how they run their business. They YOLO everything until the wheels fall off the truck. They don't care. Like, they are reckless. They are absolute. And I know this because I worked down the street from them and I knew people who worked for them. They are so reckless with all of their data privacy, all of their systems, overworking their patients or providers, overworking their workers. They just disinvest and cheap out on all the infrastructure that they have and just wait for something to happen, and just collect checks the entire time. And so they got hacked, and Andrew Whitty, the CEO of United Health Group, that's UHG and UHC are the same company. Andrew Whitty's the guy from the UK. And he was like, well, it's just too expensive to actually implement proper data security. So we're just not going to do it and see what happens. And they got hacked. And then he paid the ransom to Alpha/Black Cat. We don't really know who it was, of over $20 million. And then they said, oh, hey, it actually
Wow.
wasn't us, but thanks for the money, bye. And so billions of people's healthcare data and records are now out there in the dark web for anyone to find. And United's solution to fix this problem was to stop paying claims. They just turned off their claim system and they stopped paying all of their claims starting in February of 2024. through, I want to say like May. Like I didn't get paid from some companies that use Change Healthcare because, like I said, it's a monopoly because all of these companies have outsourced or offshored their own in-house claims processing capacity for like 6 months. I was like really financially in a tough spot. Some practices closed. People have had to take out emergency lines of credit. They had to lay off staff. Hospitals closed. Care centers closed. Nursing homes closed. A hospital group, I think that they like filed for bankruptcy. This is huge. Okay, this is a huge financial impact that no one's talking about and that United never took responsibility for. And this all happened on Brian Thompson's watch.
Hmm.
Okay, this is him. All right, like all of this infrastructure meltdown, that's on him. Okay, like he's the commissar of Chernobyl, if you ask me. Um, and then he gets shot. He's taken to an out of network hospital.
At a network hospital.
Yeah,
Okay.
he got taken to Cedars. He got taken to Sinai, which is not in network with United Healthcare because Sinai refused to because they weren't United wasn't paying their bills, so Sinai like canceled their contract.
Now, Annalise, we have had such a robust discussion, and I always enjoy catching up with you. And I'm so happy to introduce you to this listenership, to a brand new audience. Again, because if someone is interested in contracting your services or in hearing further from you, um, what do we want to let them know? Where do we want to point them to if folks want to keep up with you? Or if folks want to reach out eventually. As you said, you do have kind of a stacked list as it is, but
I'm like
how
I'm so overwhelmed. Um,
but how
just
else might folks stay in touch or follow the inevitable developments in the Luigi Mann
inevitable
case
developments. Yes.
vis-a-vis
So,
My Goth
like I
Therapist?
said, with Luigi, we all get why he did it. And none of us are necessarily disagreeing. But we're not, holding signs being like, yeah, Luigi, mostly because we can. Um, but we all get why he did it. This is systemic. It is a perverse evil and wickedness, if you ask me, caused by the financialization of healthcare. And if you want a true villain for this era, I would say Jack Welch. Jack Welch is somebody that you should look into. There's a really good Behind the Bastards 3-part episode on Jack Welch. May he rot. Um, Highly recommend. And I would say, yeah, I would say that following me on social media, I will get content out as I can when I can. Again, at my_goth_therapist. I also have a website, Gemini, like the star sign, counselingandconsulting.com. The word and is spelled out AND, not an ampersand. No dots or dashes. Gemini, counselingandconsulting.com. Website, it's as good as I can get it for right now. There is, contact information on there.
Yeah.
And speaking of contacting, did you know that Luigi's getting his mail?
Is that right?
Did you?
You mean
I
Luigi
think
is
that
able
if,
to receive mail?
Luigi's able to receive mail, his attorney has confirmed that he is getting his mail. Now, you have to make sure that it is on a standard size envelope or it is in a standard size envelope. Use standard size letter writing paper. It's like a Mead writing pad. I can read this off to you as well if you can't see it very well on Zoom. 10 pages. Your limit is 10 pages. Number every single page. And you have to write your full return address on the last page of the letter. It has to be a real return address. P.O. boxes do count though. So if you want to send everything from a P.O. box, that's totally fine. And look, we all need to work on our penmanship. Penmanship is very important. It's great for fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination and all of that. And here is the address. Okay.
Please be my
And
guest.
I'll send it to you in chat as well, but it is to Luigi Nicholas Mangione, Mangione, 52503-511, M as in Mary, D like David, C like Charlie, Brooklyn, Metropolitan Detention Center, P.O. Box 329002, Brooklyn, New York 11232, USA.
Wow. There you have it.
White paper, white paper, no lines, blue or black ink only. You cannot use perfume. You cannot use color. You cannot include photographs. Just but yeah,
Now,
he's getting his mail if they don't throw it out.
you wouldn't be at liberty to say whether that's your letter to Luigi Mangione or not, would you?
I like working on my penmanship. I think it's always very important to practice.
That looks like some good cursive, I do have to say.
Oh, it's Danielian actually. Any of my fellow handwriting nerds out there, there's different, like styles, font
Hmm.
styles you can do. So my preferred font style is Danielian.
What's your favorite font, just period, when you're writing a Google Doc or on Word?
I am a big fan of Helvetica.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm a Georgia, but I respect Helvetica.
And then my other favorite one is Kanata MN.
Canada MM. Okay. I haven't looked into
That's
that.
that's a less standard one. You'd use that for like a header, but
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Anneliese, I've had such a great time speaking with you for this first installment of 2025 of JT the LA Storyteller Podcast. You will have some links. Actually, you've already got some links in my inbox for the show notes so that folks can spiral down the rabbit hole all the more so on their time. But I really do think that we'll have to catch up again soon before too long, just as well, because there are so many changes coming so quickly, and folks need primers on such changes. Folks need a bit of guidance on all of the red tape to sift through. Folks need a little bit of moral support just as well, even if only in the form of a podcast discussion in solidarity with their struggle against these corporations. So I can't wait to do this again
Oh,
soon. And if there's
oh,
anything else, by all means, please. Now is that time.
I almost forgot. I'm sorry. You can edit this in later. But the number one thing that you all as consumers can do to, make the insurance companies bleed like a death from a thousand paper cuts, they actually legitimately get in trouble for ghost networks. Ghost networks, and it's considered fraud. That is a way to go after them legally. They are getting sued. They are getting the pants sued off of them. And so, what you can do if you have the time is if you go through that directory and you call out to all these providers, particularly mental health providers, because it's particularly bad for mental health, and you write down every single inaccuracy, inconsistency, provider who's no longer practicing or in the state or whatever, report every single one of them if you can to the State Department of Insurance. Every single state in the US has a Department of Insurance or an insurance commissioner. Report all of those inaccuracies to your state insurance commissioner. Don't report it to the insurance company because they will throw it away. I
Hmm.
know this because I saw people do it at Cigna. So that actually can impact their ability to renew their license to operate in whatever state that they're in.
A light bulb has gone off, and I think I know who I'm writing to next. So thank you for sneaking that in. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and remember, guys, let's all work on our penmanship. I think that penmanship skills are very important.
I could not agree more, especially during this time. So, Annalise, thank you once again. Let's take a screenshot for the socials.
All right.
Yeah. Yes.